things. One, the first thing we're going to do today is go over the schedule. I'm just going to talk about where we're headed, what we're doing. We have sort of this week off of mini lessons, and we have some things that we have to get done during that time. So then I'm going to teach a model lesson using a think-aloud. You guys all read about think-alouds for homework. I'm going to teach a lesson using a think-aloud where I will do a model and a guided practice. The reason that we're doing this is because next time you're going to bring a short excerpt that you will use one of your evidence outcomes to teach. Okay? And so pay attention to what I'm doing because I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. You're going to actually teach a think-aloud to a group of 3 to 4 other students using the same techniques I used today. And we're going to build a rubric in class today based on what you see, so that when you teach that think-aloud to your groups, you will all be able to grade each other using that rubric, and you're going to grade yourself using that rubric to kind of see where you are. Because metacognating and thinking aloud and doing guided practice correctly are some of the most important pieces to helping students learn how to read in a content area. Just straight out. So I'm going to move into the model. So from here on out, just start to take notes about what I do because I'm going to treat you like a class. Okay? All right, so today we are going to look at using textual evidence to write summaries and make inferences about what we are reading. The reason we do this is it's good to stop and summarize as we're reading because good readers check their comprehension as they're going. It's a skill that they use naturally and that they do often and very quickly. We're going to slow it down today and look at it in pieces. Another thing that we're going to do is make inferences about what we're reading. The reason we do this is because authors often don't say everything they mean in a text. Especially when you're looking at something like poetry, which we're going to look at today, where they use very few words to say what they mean. So, because authors don't say what they mean, we have to make inferences to get to the true meaning of text. And that's another skill that good readers use. So we're going to look at a text today. It's called Oranges. And it's a poem by Gary Soto. Yeah. Oh, please. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to read this text to you. And then we're going to go back and look at summary and making inferences. Okay? Oranges by Gary Soto. The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold and weighted down with 2 oranges in my jacket. December. Frost cracking beneath my steps, my breath before me, then gone. As I walked toward her house, the one whose porch light burned yellow, night and day in any weather, a dog barked at me until she came out, pulling at her gloves. Face, bright with rouge. I smiled, touched her shoulder, and led her down the street, across a used car lot in a line of newly planted trees, until we were breathing before a drugstore. We entered, the tiny bell bringing a saleslady down a narrow aisle of goods. I turned to the candies, tiered like bleachers, and asked what she wanted. Light in her eyes, a smile starting at the corners of her mouth. I fingered a nickel in my pocket, and when she lifted a chocolate that cost a dime, I didn't say anything. I took the nickel from my pocket, then an orange, and set them quietly on the counter. When I looked up, the lady's eyes met mine and held them, knowing very well what it was all about. Outside, a few cars hissing past, fog hanging like old coats between the trees, I took my girl's hand in mine for 2 blocks, then released it to let her unwrap the chocolate. I peeled my orange that was so bright against the gray of December that from some distance, someone might have thought I was making a fire with my hands. Okay, so in this poem we're going to use 2 skills. One, we're going to stop and summarize as we read. And one of the reasons that we're going to stop and summarize is so that we can make sure we understand what it's saying first. Then we're going to make some inferences. And that's where we're going to look at what the author isn't saying. And an inference, like I said, it's when we look at what an author isn't saying, because an inference is when we take what the writing says, which is summary, plus what we know. So our background knowledge, our prior experience. I'll make that an actual math equation there, so as not to upset the math people. So when we take what the writing says, so our summary, plus what we know, so our prior background knowledge, things we've read, things we've seen, things we've heard, things we've experienced, we put those two together, and that's how we make inferences. So I'm gonna separate my paper, and I just want you to do the same thing with yours, okay? So I have mine up here on the document camera, so just follow along with what I'm doing. So the first break I'm going to make is right here. And I'm actually going to also chunk it off at the title. On this side of my paper, I'm going to write summary. And on this side, I'm going to write inference. I'm also going to number my lines so that I know where to refer to from when we're talking about it. And I'm just going to do every 5 lines. And you can just mark yours like I do mine.